Guest today. His name is Steve Hofer from Airlex Law, and he's going to go over things that are important to you as a result of the big, beautiful bill last year. And The floor is all yours, Steve. Take it away, brother.
All right.
Oh,
Greetings,
wait a minute.
everybody.
Before I go up, because there's a bunch of people signing on now. If you have questions and you're on the Zoom call, just unmute yourself and ask the question. Interrupt it. If you're on the live stream, tap it in the chat and Marcella will interrupt us. She's good at interrupting people. All right, Steve, it's all yours, brother.
Okay. Well, greetings, everybody. We're going to do a presentation to talk about a number of issues that are, I think, important right now at this very moment in business aviation. I will tell you that my presentation today will be a little bit different from presentations I've done in the past. Normally, I try and be modestly well rehearsed for a presentation, but I've had an interesting few days, and I guess it's a good thing. We closed on the sale of a Caravan on Monday. We closed on the sale of a G4 SP on Monday. We've entered into let's see, agreements for the purchase of a 604 and God, what was the other one? And I'm working on an LOI right now for the sale of an L-59. Oh, a Dassault, a Falcon. So I guess if that's an interesting thing and a good thing, because what it tells me is that notwithstanding some headwinds right now, the private aviation market still seems to be very strong. Now, in general, we'll talk now. I think we'll jump into our slide presentation a bit, and I'll tell you that what we're seeing. I think the first thing that I want to talk about is in terms of problems on the horizon is jet fuel. So if we can jump along to that. One more down. Problems on the, there you go. There you go. I think probably anybody who's involved in business aviation, and for that matter, almost anybody in the world, right, in the at least the industrialized world, is aware of what's happened to fuel prices since February 28th, since the beginning of the war in Iran. The cost of both Jet A and avgas have absolutely soared. Between February 20, the last prices that I pulled down before the war began, through April 6th, I think when I put these slides together, the price of raw Jet A had went from $2.75 per gallon to $4.71 a gallon. That was a 71.2% increase. The retail price went from $6.90 up to $9.05. That was a 31% increase, which obviously is not as high, but a lot of that was driven, at least initially, by a couple of factors. One of them was the fact that FBOs and other retailers had stockpile, fuel in the tank that they could draw out, and that made it easier for them to absorb some of that, those radical price increases. And also, as a matter of customer service and an effort to manage ongoing relations with customers, FBOs, management companies did not want to increase prices as dramatically as what they were experiencing. But I think it's safe to say that we haven't seen the end of it. We're going to continue to see, I think, wild fluctuations. We're going to see price spikes that are going to go up and down. We've seen it on an almost daily basis. A lot of it is what you see in the market right now is being driven by what the market perceives to be expectations about a ceasefire, or a ceasefire going forward or not actually taking place. Large refiners of Jet A generally have stockpiles of about 60 to 90 days on hand, which they obviously purchased at this point at lower costs. But we're really running up against the end of those stockpiles. We're now almost 2 full months into this war. I think tomorrow we will be. And those stockpiles are going to run out. And the increases in price spikes have gone anywhere, have been, depending upon where you are, and there have been dramatic regional differences, but they have gone anywhere from 73 to 100% increases, 130% increases. Price of a barrel of oil has gone as high as $200 a barrel. Dramatic regional differences. So I think we're going to start to see significant problems, because if inventory continues to run low, replacement fuel becomes harder and harder to purchase. You're going to see wholesale prices going much, much higher. You could, because we also have the issue of whether demand will outstrip supply. The other thing that I think the business aviation has to keep in mind is that airlines always get the first call on Jet A. They're the largest purchasers, and they're in the position to make the greater demand, and suppliers, refiners will always respond to the needs of the airlines before they respond to the needs of business aviation. That's also going to impact owners. Unless you're an incredibly wealthy owner and have your own separate fuel supplies, you're probably dependent upon the FBOs or aircraft management companies that you work with, and those are all going to be impacted. I think you're going to see situations where even large owners will begin to feel the pinch. I think that you're going to see situations where they may lead, if they've got access to multiple aircraft, or if they've got multiple opportunities, if they've got a fractional share and a larger aircraft of their own, they may choose to leave the larger aircraft in the hangar and take their fractional share and use that, or perhaps use a charter. I think another thing you're going to see very dramatically in the near future is charter operators, I think, are for the first time are going to start to be much more like their fractional cousins, and they're going to be much more inclined to apply fuel surcharges. Fractional contracts allow for that already. They've allowed for that for years, and they can change the price up or down every month based upon the price that they're experiencing at the wholesale level. So fractional customers are going to see that as well, but charter operators are now starting to apply that for the first time ever, and I think that could end up becoming a permanent feature of charter operation. You're going to see charter operators who are automatically going to build that into their quotes. They're going to build that into their terms and conditions, and basically that could be a permanent feature of charter operations in the future. We're certainly seeing at the airline level already. Fares are going up, fuel surcharges are being added, flight frequency is being dramatic. You're seeing airlines that are United, for example, has cut its flight availability dramatically, all because of the issues that we're facing. And it's tough to foresee what we're going to have right now. A lot of it is going to be based upon how soon the Strait of Hormuz is opened. But I think another aspect of it is going to be not just the opening of the strait, but how soon can we expect there to be some real impact on infrastructure. There's been dramatic damage to the infrastructure on fuel all through the Middle East, certainly in Iran, but in all of the other countries surrounding Iran as well, and surrounding the Strait of Hormuz. So I think you're going to see a dramatic impact on that. Another aspect of it, I think, is the fact that when you look at charter operators, competitive pricing is going to force them to absorb some of these fuel costs, that's going to lead to lower profitability. And charter operators, as I think everybody on this program knows, already operate on fairly slim margins. So there's a good likelihood that there's going to be a significant impact. This could lead to a further shakeout in charter operations. There may be some charter operations that are operating on the margin that simply cannot tolerate this. So if you're involved right now in supporting owners or customers who deal with charter operations, you may want to revisit that issue with them and take a look at who their charter operators are, who their managers are, whether they've got a company that can support, can get through this situation successfully and continue to provide them with lift, continue to provide them with management. If you lose a charter operator, if you lose a management company, you may be suddenly faced with a situation where you've got a contract that you've got for long-term operations that simply isn't going to be fulfilled anymore. If you own the aircraft, you may end up needing to change a situation where you're going to have pilots who, because of the long-term FAA regulations that have been in effect now for 20 years or so, governing who employs the pilots, you may suddenly be faced with a situation where you've got to deal with pilots who no longer have employment with operators, and you have to figure out whether you're going to employ them under a strict Part 91 operation, or whether you're going to try and get it quickly into another 135 operation and move those pilots over. Other things I think you're going to see, I think there may end up being more significant charges for empty legs, repositioning flights. Operators may look to figure out how to mitigate costs through different routing, more fuel efficient routing, where they're going to, where they're coming from, where they can look for maybe slightly cheaper pricing on fuel. All of that's going to have an impact on charter customers and on aircraft management customers. So I think you basically just have to look for a likelihood that over the long term, at least the midterm, I think that prices in the charter market, at the very least, I think we have to expect they're going to be probably 40% higher. I have not been paying attention to my slides. So Keith, is there anything that we should show people that we haven't already showed them? Again, I'm sort of just talking here and trying to provide people with more feedback, but give everybody, see if the slides maybe the slides have followed with what I've been talking about.
Okay, now we're here.
Okay. All right, now we'll talk a little bit about the Big Beautiful Bill. And the Big Beautiful Bill obviously has changed the world of business aviation dramatically since it was signed into law last year on July 4th. I'm sure practically anybody who was involved in business aviation, whether you're a CPA, a manager, a business manager, an aviation attorney, you saw the dramatic impact that the Big Beautiful Bill had, and the return of 100% accelerated depreciation through the end of 2025. By the way, most people refer to it as bonus depreciation. I always refer to it as accelerated depreciation, because the reality is it's still 100% depreciation. That didn't change. The difference is that it's now depreciation and deduction that you can take at the level of 100% of your business usage in the first year of acquisition. That was if we go back and look over the last 20 some years of history of bonus depreciation, for several years it was 100% depreciation. In the first Trump administration, the law changed, and we started to see a tick down of 20% a year, so that by last year it was down to 40%. And that was obviously impacting how people were thinking about business acquisitions. But when the big beautiful bill was adopted, it went to 100% depreciation. It stayed that way. There is no expected cutoff. So I think that one can anticipate that bonus depreciation is going to continue to have an impact for the foreseeable future. I was stunned at the impact it had. I'm surprised at how much it's continued to have an impact. We saw a little bit of a drop in demand right at the start of the year, but already people are starting to come back into the market very actively, looking for whole aircraft acquisitions. And so Keith, go to the end where I think I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. We'll come back to some of this stuff. But I think one of the things I talk about at the end of these slides is, go on down to the bottom, because I want to talk a little bit about, I think, what's likely to have impact a little further down. A little further down. A little further down. Sorry, folks. Keep going. Because I want to jump ahead and talk a little bit about, I'm going to jump to my final thoughts and then I'll come back to some of these other things. Because I think one of the things I think that it's important for you to understand, if you're supporting or managing people who are looking to acquire an aircraft for 2026, I think the lessons that we learned at the end of 2025 are really relevant and will continue to be relevant and will probably have an impact even as early as the middle of this year. Certainly do not wait until the end of the year to do your acquisition or your acquisition planning. We saw people who wanted to buy airplanes at the end of the year who literally could not buy airplanes because there was simply no market available. But one of the other big things that had a tremendous impact on our ability to close transactions at the end of the year was pre-purchase inspections. Maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities, the companies that do the pre-purchase inspections, especially certainly for the larger aircraft, they've got a limited availability. They've only got so many slots. They've only got so many mechanics. And once that gets filled up, they simply can't take anymore. So we had people who were coming to the end of the year who wanted to do a deal, who had found a seller, who with airplanes that they were willing to sell, but we simply could not find slots at any facility. Now that ended up resulting in what I'd call certainly some unique and creative solutions, but not solutions that I think anybody would have embraced if they could have avoided it. One of them was you had very cursory inspections being conducted by people who really didn't have full licensing capability to sign off on an aircraft. And because buyers were willing to take a risk, they were so anxious to get into the airplane that they were willing to strike deals where pre-purchase inspections would actually either be very cursory at the end of the year, or they would be literally postponed into 2026 until a slot was available. And we were creating situations like holdbacks. We'd try and estimate how much the discrepancies in an aircraft might cause a need for post-closing repairs, and then we'd put an estimate. We'd leave it in escrow as a holdback, or in some situations, buyers were simply willing to say, you know what, I'll take my chances. I'll agree. And this was, of course, sellers wouldn't want to go too high on this either. So we had situations where there was a cutoff. And if the cost of the repairs was going to exceed the $200,000 or $250,000 that was left in escrow, that was just on the buyer. And the buyer said, you know what, I'm so anxious to get the bonus depreciation, I'm happy to take that risk. So we've seen a lot of those situations occurring and going into 2026. And I think that, if nothing else, that may have been a sort of creative solution that may continue to have application now in the future. It's certainly not the best way to do it. You would always prefer to get a comprehensive pre-purchase inspection, figure out exactly what needs to be repaired, and then take care of it. And again, a bit of a war story here. I will just tell you that I've already dealt with one situation this year where the repairs that needed to be done exceeded either the seller or buyer's expectations. And now there's a post-closing negotiation going on, and there are questions being raised about was the pre-purchase inspection done properly? Were the disclosures proper? A little bit of initial finger pointing going on that could ultimately create problems. Worst case scenario litigation. So those are the reasons why you don't want to do a hurried pre-purchase inspection if you can avoid it. Let's go down to the next slide. I want to see what may come. So I'm taking a look at the slide with you folks. Yeah, another point that we make on this slide is that the defects that have to be repaired to get the aircraft back in service sometimes, and this again can be a serious problem at the end of the year. Let's say that you've got a situation where you know that you want to conduct, and we always recommend at least 3 flights at the end of the year, but if you close on the 30th of December, 3 flights may simply be impossible. But even if you close in July or August this year, you may have situations where you've got an aircraft where repairs are necessary, but because we have lingering supply chain issues that still are impacting business aviation these days, you may have a period of time where you simply can't get the parts that you need to finish the repairs. Everything may be ready to be buttoned up. The MRO, the inspection facility, has said, we've done everything we need to do, everything that we can put our hands on that we can repair, everything that we can get parts for, we've fixed, but we can't fix this. And until we fix this, until we get the part for this, we can't return the aircraft to service. And then so the aircraft may be sitting. This may create other ramifications. Now you've got the situation of, okay, what about the service programs that may be in effect? What about CAMP or Honeywell programs or JSSI, other programs that may be in effect? What agreements have been reached to pay for the monthly fees for that? What about monthly flying that has to be performed? These sorts of things, again, can crop up. So again, if you're planning an aircraft acquisition this year, think about these issues, plan for them in advance, give yourself literally a couple of months. I notice I've also got something about lenders. Let's stay up on the previous slide. I don't think lenders present so much of a problem mid-year, but certainly at the end of the year, we've also seen this. Lenders reach a point where they simply say, I've got no more capacity. I don't have the personnel to process this. The lawyers that support me as a lender don't have the bandwidth to do this. Or depending if it's a specialty lender, they may simply say, we don't have the financial wherewithal to support your transaction. And I note a couple of other things there. Waiting too late. Unless the pilots are going to come with the aircraft that you're acquiring, and sometimes they don't, you may be out there looking for pilots, or you may be placing the aircraft with a management company with either a strictly Part 91 management or a 135 management operation, where they've got to come up with pilots. Are those pilots trained to operate that aircraft? Are there pilots available? Is the pool of pilots for that particular aircraft wide enough in that particular regional location where you can get pilots who can actually be hired, and they may have to be trained to fly that aircraft. Even if they don't need to be trained, they may need enough time in the aircraft to satisfy the insurance requirements. They might satisfy the open pilot warranty for the insurer, or they may not. Or the insurer may demand additional time and type for those particular pilots. So there are a lot of issues that are peripheral to actually closing an aircraft purchase that can come up to bite you on the hiney. That wasn't in my script. Especially if you wait till the end of the year. So I think those are some important things to think about and learn. Now, I've sort of gone through my final thoughts, so I think I'll go back and let's talk about some of the other stuff. And Keith, who's managing the slides, let's go back to the top of bonus depreciation. Okay, I think I've sort of sorted the next one down. I've sort of sorted through this a little bit, so I'll probably go through this quickly. But as you can see, we noted that bonus depreciation was actually due to be phased out by 2027. But now and going forward, and there is no cutoff date under the big beautiful bill, 100% bonus depreciation is the law of the land and is going to stay the law of the land for the foreseeable future. That obviously is an incredible advantage for business ownership if you acquire an aircraft. But you do have, let's go down the next slide and see where we're, I think some important points to here. It applies to both new and pre-owned aircraft. As I said, it's permanent, no phase out. Go ahead and go down. Go ahead and go down. Oh, okay, sorry. We talked about how it caused a significant spike in the third and fourth quarters. Go ahead. Give people enough time to read it. It's certainly a simplified tax return preparation. And so if you're a provider of tax services, if you're a CPA, you have a lot less to worry about now with complicated depreciation rules. You don't have to track the aircraft value over a period of several years. You don't have to worry about change over the years. You can claim the 100% write-off in the year of the purchase, but that's not the end of the story. Go ahead. These are some points I've made. I'll kind of jump over them quickly. I think it does allow business owners. It's a value. It's very much a value added for business owners because they can now take the cash that they would otherwise not have available, and because of the value of bonus depreciation, they can funnel that back into their business. And as I note, I think it's more likely to cause first-time buyers to enter the market, and buyers are all buyers, whether they're first-time or repeat buyers, may be more likely to purchase larger jets than they otherwise would have acquired because of bonus depreciation. Next slide. Now, as I said, there are some issues you still need to be aware of. And the most critical issue is that you've got to be able to show that you meet the 50% test. And that's not just in that first year, but that's for every year during the years of ownership, during what would otherwise be the depreciation period. Because if you don't satisfy that, if you fall below that, you face the risk of recapture, which can be a huge impact in terms of increasing your income in years that you weren't expecting it. And it's not real income, it's tax income, it's phantom income that you have to factor back into your tax return when it's not, in fact, real dollars going back into your pocket. So that's a danger that you have to need to be aware of. And again, the important thing here is in all years, you've got to keep your business usage up above 50%. If you fall below that, then you are at a significant risk. I don't know what my next slide says. Haven't looked at the deck for a while, but I will say that I think it's, if you're looking, let's go ahead and go down to the next one. Well, this fits well with what I was about to say. Whether you're at the end of a year or whether you're in any other year, you've got to be very aware of your record keeping. I'll tell you a short war story here. Several years ago, I was representing a client on a federal audit, and the IRS wanted to see all of the records that the taxpayer had for all the years, all of the people who had flown flights, where they'd flown flights, where they'd gone, who was on board each flight, why each person was on board, all of the sorts of information that the IRS is entitled to see and fully expects to see and expects the taxpayer to produce. And so I went to meet with the taxpayer. It was a very significant company here in California. And we said to the CEO, we need to see all of this all the records that you've been maintaining, all the documentation. And if you haven't maintained it, we're going to have to create it after the fact, which you can legally do. But obviously the IRS looks at it much more askance if it wasn't contemporaneously created. In other words, created at the time the flights were flown. And the CEO told us, well, and the CFO told us that's going to create real problems, because the only person who had that information, it was the personal assistant to the CEO. I said, well, then we need to meet with that person. And they said, well, we'd love to be able to have you talk to her, but she's dead. So that created a very significant problem for us on that audit. That's the reason why from the get-go, you need to maintain accurate, contemporaneous, thorough record keeping. And you have to consciously always be aware of the fact that to the extent you're using your aircraft on mixed use, personal and business, that if you use it too much for personal, you could lose your deduction entirely. We recommend to people in situations like this that you consider, for example, if you have a whole aircraft that you use for business and you have charter opportunities or fractional opportunities, particularly if you don't have a fractional one, but you have a charter company that you've worked with, you better consider if you've got family that, you got to do that flight to take them to, they've always wanted to see New Zealand, or you're going for the annual visit to, the annual holiday visit to Maui, maybe you better think about chartering, because at least charter won't do any damage to your record keeping or your potential depreciation or your deduction for your business aircraft. So consider options that may be available to preserve your depreciation. Go ahead. Other big issue that we need to think about is business usage versus business entertainment. I'm gonna let Keith. And this, I think, is this is another consequence of the Tax and Jobs Creation Act that was enacted during the first Trump administration. Entertainment use of business jets is generally not deductible. So your expenses for operation, whether it's fuel, crew, depreciation on entertainment flights, are disallowed under IRS Section 274. And there is a strict allocation required for mixed use flights. So that's something you've got to be very, very aware of. I think that right now, especially with bonus depreciation having come back, the issue of entertainment flights are the biggest single risk that business owners now face when it comes to audit at the federal level. And the question often arises, well, what's deductible, what's not? And people want to say, well, I'm taking the guy to the Super Bowl, and it's vital to my marketing interest. Probably doesn't matter if if the expenses are incurred for entertainment or amusement or recreation. Those are the magic words. If it's basically for an entertainment purpose, the fact that you may be entertaining existing clients or cultivating future client relationships with potential new clients doesn't matter. That probably is not going to be deductible. So you also need to think about how you make certain that when you maximize your business use, you also factor in entertainment use and make certain that you're keeping your solid business usage of your aircraft up at a point that supports your deduction. When you deal with entertainment flights, you may still have opportunities to deduct some of it. But again, you're going to need to be very careful about how you manage your record keeping. There are various methods you can use. You can use it flight by flight, seat hours, miles, that sort of thing. But the IRS is very specific in saying, pick a method and stand by it. You basically are not in a position where year from year that you can shift your accounting to what works best for you. The IRS expects that you will do this on a consistent basis. I'm going to take a look at my slides here. Business usage, essential, ordinary expense required to conduct business operations. Yes, that's right. Let's go on to the next slide, see what I say there. Yeah, I think I've emphasized that already. Again, social amusement, recreation purposes, concerts, golf, sporting events, Super Bowl, a concert by Kid Rock or Bruce Springsteen, depending on which side of the political divide you rest right now. Neither one's going to be deductible. So again, even if it has a clear business purpose, such as building goodwill, that is probably not going to be deductible. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. Yeah, we started the year assuming that we were probably going to be, we were going to be really on a going forward basis in a very, very good place. And I think we're in a surprisingly good place because the market is, especially at the high end, is continuing to tolerate the war. But there's only so much you can do. We do face, as I note here, and I think I've already talked about it, higher fuel costs, potential shortage. I think another aspect that we ought to think about is stock market impact, general stock market jitters. Right now, the market has gone up and down since the beginning of the year. There have been incredible market drops. There have been incredible market surges. The market now seems to sort of be, I would say, factoring in the war, and there is some expectation that the war may ultimately get behind us. But the S&P fell 9% between the start of the war and late March. It has recovered some of those losses, and in fact, it's hit some new highs. But I think it's important to note that some of those, a lot of the market rebound has been in different sectors. Tech sectors have led the rebound, but companies that are not in the tech sector, metals, mining, mortgage financing, residential construction, businesses that you could anticipate would be negatively impacted, especially by higher fuel prices. Those have all been negatively impacted in the market, and I think that those are things that we can expect. We've seen some weakness in defense stocks, which has surprised me, but I think they will ultimately recover. Certainly, the oil industry has done pretty well, but again, we've seen a lot of what I would call massive internal disconnect in the market between companies like NVIDIA or Microsoft and companies that are not doing well.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Jack Rogers from our live stream said that he's seeing a rise in remote pre-purchase inspections in the piston market, and the main choke points that he's facing is buyer unease and creating as comprehensive as possible of a program.
I think I understand that, but let's do a little bit of interaction on that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. First of all, I would say that yes, whether we talk about turboprop, piston, I think in all areas, but certainly at the higher end, you talk about, and I've been writing these contracts for 30 some years. The two things that I can tell you that have changed pretty dramatically over the last 10 years or so, and certainly in the last couple of years, basically since COVID, but with bonus depreciation last year as well. The two things that I see changing all significantly are much more comprehensive pre-purchase inspection planning and stricter delivery conditions. And those two things are sort of tied together. But years ago, we did not make it a practice to add the MRO's work scope to the purchase agreement. These days, we generally do, because once you get into the pre-purchase inspection and the work scope, you're really dealing with three different parties that have significant interest and involvement, and to a certain degree, conflicting interests. And these are all have to be balanced and negotiated. The buyer wants the most comprehensive delivery conditions imaginable. They want the most comprehensive work scope imaginable. The seller pretty much comes at it from the different place. In a perfect world, the seller wants an as-is, where-is, with no pre-purchase inspection. But obviously, that's not realistic. Where I'm starting to see some more significant interplay now is with the MROs themselves, because the MROs realize that the more strict the work scope, the more strict the delivery conditions, the more that the purchase agreement is being placed in front of them, and they're being asked to comment on it, or they're being asked to develop their proposal for a work scope based upon what's in the purchase agreement. They now become a more significant player in your negotiation. You may essentially have to get the MRO to sign off on what you're talking about before you can actually finalize your purchase agreement, because the MRO obviously they don't want to be the referee if they can absolutely avoid it. And sometimes you pick impartial third-party referees for disputes, and they also don't want to be left holding the bag. They're going to write their contracts now. I'm talking about the MRO contracts. They're going to write that in a way that makes certain that somebody's paying the bill, not them. Whatever the repair cost is, whatever is required to get the aircraft back into service, somebody's got to pay for that. And they expect to either be the seller or the buyer, but they're not going to sign off on a return to the aircraft until they're paid in full. So I don't know if that's responsive to that question, but that is certainly a big aspect. I think our whole idea here was to talk about, developing issues and what I see as, current conditions in the market. And to the person who posed that question, yes, absolutely, that's becoming a big issue at all levels, even down at the level of piston. I'm actually working on a piston transaction right now that I've got to get that sale agreement drafted here before the end of the week, and that's an issue with the inspection facility. I'll add one last point to that. I mentioned it in passing a few seconds ago, but I think one of the things that you will sometimes do is you'll end up with people who end up getting appointed as third-party referees. Sometimes these come from the manufacturers. Sometimes you pick them from within the industry, people who are recognized and respected, and both seller and buyer are willing to agree to that person. Because if the MRO says, "Look, folks, we're not referees. Our obligation is to take the manufacturer's manuals and apply what's in the manufacturer's manuals to the work scope that we've agreed to perform, to do all of the inspections that are required, to check everything off. That's what we're here to do. But if you guys get into excuse my language, a pissing contest about what a disagreement about something in the work scope, we're not the people who are going to make that decision. Somebody else has to make it. And what I find is that either ends up becoming a point of negotiation between buyer and seller. Sometimes you end up saying, look, hey, let's split the cost, or, you fight over it and you come to an ultimate agreement. But sometimes you've appointed somebody in advance to be the ultimate decider, your arbitrator, if you will, to make that final call. Was that responsive to the question, Marcella?
Yes, I think it was.
Okay. Let's see, we're at 10:45. I'm happy to stop and take some. How much, Keith, have we gone through? Have we gone through all of our slides, more or less? And I apologize, folks, for taking these out of order. If there's a desire to go through them again briefly, or Marcella, if they're available to people who look at them afterwards, or if people, I think we've always worked this on the presentations, that if you have questions, certainly you can post them to Tom or Marcella, and they will forward them on to me, and I'm happy to try and be responsive.
Correct. And
Slides?
after this is over, I also am going to send an email to everybody who has joined that includes a copy of this recording and your contact information, just in case they want to talk to you directly as well.
Okay. Keith tells me we've got 3 or 4 slides we haven't looked at, so we're going to look at them. I'll do my quick advertisement here. I've been doing this. I've been practicing law, be 46 years this summer, 32 years specifically in the aviation industry. Started in aviation insurance defense, moved into transactional work about 30 some years ago, and my firm has done 1,100 whole and fractional aircraft transactions. We do every aspect of it. We do transactions, we do litigation, we do labor and employment, we represent 135 operators, we represent management companies, buyers, sellers, lessors, lessees, fractional, whole aircraft, and then we also do tax work. But when it comes to sales and use tax, especially here in the state of California, we look to Tom and Julie Alston and the rest of the team at Aero and Marine. Tom has been doing this work as long as I have, I think even longer maybe. And they are the people who, when I have questions regarding sales and use tax matters that I'm not certain about, I call Tom and Julie. So that's an advertisement for both Airlex and Aero and Marine. Go ahead, Keith. A few other slides we should look at. Yeah, I think we've touched upon this already. I think the supply chain issues are easing, but I still see this. I still see this remarkably on a regular basis. And sometimes it's 1 or 2 days to get a replacement part. Sometimes it can be weeks. And the reason why it often takes a long time is because a lot of your major manufacturers, Gulfstream, Dassault, Bombardier, they don't want to manufacture this stuff forever. They don't want it. They don't want to keep, even if they're not manufacturing it, even if they have subcontractors who are manufacturing this stuff, they don't want to keep large stocks on hand forever. They want to run basically a just-in-time production. So some of this goes out to smaller companies. You get, as time goes on, you get fewer and fewer people who are producing these products. I've had companies that said, we've got 5 of these in stock. We don't see the demand for it. We're never going to produce anything. Once those 5 are gone, it's done. So that can create a problem as well. As a couple of good points there, I think we're seeing throughout the industry, the pandemic really brought it into play, but it's just coming into larger play in that at the larger level, we are not getting enough people into aviation, in aircraft maintenance, technicians at all levels. Certainly it's an issue with pilots as well. And right now, at this particular moment, I think looking out over the next 4 to 5 years, you're going to see the United States military with a need to do dramatic replenishment of its stocks and supplies and refurbishment of its aircraft. And so military contractors are likely going to be in a much better position to offer primo salaries for technicians, and that's going to make it harder for folks in our industries, whether it's the 135 operator who wants to have a full service shop and have a maintenance department as part of their offerings, to bring in more 135 clients, or the standalone MROs. They're going to find it harder to hire qualified people. Go ahead, Keith. Yeah, fractional ownership doing incredibly well. You know, I was thinking back. I mean, I started doing fractional ownerships. The first fractional deals I ever worked on, 96. There were it was the wild, wild west. I actually wrote the contracts for a number of fractional providers, and one still fractional operator that I can't identify, actually had me rewrite their contracts completely. You know, that market has narrowed completely, I think, for all intents and purposes, except for some specialty fractional providers and leasing programs where you've got block leasing. You've essentially got two providers, NetJets and FlexJet, but they are doing incredibly well because they offer a product where people are able to buy in with less of an initial investment and less annual cost, and people only have to pay for as much usage as they expect they'll need. So that continues to be a hot market. There are individuals that I think that there are issues that are fractional presents. We're still looking at how states on a state-by-state basis treat fractional ownership for tax purposes, including here in California. But fractional has been very successful. OEMs have been very successful, and I think we had a couple slides talking about the wide range of new aircraft that are coming, have either come online or will be coming online the next couple of years. Go ahead. Yeah, all of these aircraft came online last year. You can see two of them, the Global 8000, the G800, ultra long range product. Manufacturers obviously think that's where the biggest profits are to be made. Textron, I think, you know, Textron is the evolution of Cessna and Beech and all of that. Obviously the smaller products have gone away, but they're still looking at filling the void that Gulfstream and Bombardier and Dassault are to a certain extent leaving behind. And so the Textron Ascend is a mid-size aircraft that is now available. And then we got several that are coming up in the next couple of years. Go ahead, next slide. Yeah, we've got the G400 going to come online. That's a unique specialty product. The Denali, the Beechcraft Denali, you know, the single engine turboprop, that's not going to be a nice niche product for in a market that has not been well served in recent years. A lot of those aircraft are getting, you know, long in the tooth. I don't know. I want to sit in the left seat in a really old King Air these days. And then you've got new product coming online here in the next couple of years. The Falcon 10X, a lot of excitement about that. The Honda Jet Echelon, that's going to be an interesting product. That's a single pilot transcontinental aircraft. And then the G300, a super mid-sized aircraft. But you can see that in general, the market is pointing towards the higher end, higher profit aircraft. So again, I apologize, folks, for jumping around. Again, blame it on me being really busy the last couple of weeks. Keith, can we go to the end again and just look at real quickly the final thoughts? Again, I think biggest issue is, you know, last year we didn't have a choice. The big beautiful, we sort of expected the big beautiful bill was going to come online, but we couldn't be certain until July 4th. You know, if you remember, Congress was still negotiating at the end of July. We didn't know, and they had a lot of things to negotiate that had absolutely nothing to do with bonus depreciation. So we couldn't know for certain until July 4th that we were going to have 100% bonus depreciation. We know we've got it now, but if the market continues to be strong, there are going to be aspects that are simply going to have to be, you're going to have to keep in mind. I think, you know, we only have so many MRO facilities. There is some movement in that direction, but I don't think the growth over the next several years in MRO is going to be as great as the demand. Go ahead. I think we talked about this a little bit, and I think that was a great question. on pre-purchase inspections. That's just one of the biggest new issues, biggest, not new, but biggest issues over the last several years that has come up, and it's become a bigger issue in the negotiation of contracts, a bigger issue in the execution of ultimate delivery conditions, and a bigger issue that owner and seller are paying very careful attention to while the pre-buy is going on, as the pre-buy comes to an end, as the report is issued, as the discrepancies, the final decisions are made about who's responsible for fixing the discrepancies. All of that is having an impact on pre-purchase inspections. Another thing I didn't touch upon earlier, but I mentioned now as well. Back in the day, you did not see a lot of pre-purchase daily reporting on pre-purchase inspection, but now it's like Hollywood. We have the dailies, and a lot of pre-purchase inspection facilities will generate reports on a daily basis with the idea that seller and buyer want to work those issues out if they can on a daily basis and give instructions to the MRO on a next day, nightly basis on this is what needs to be done, so that the MRO can do the repair as quickly as possible. That's vital for lots of reasons. Sometimes because that repair is in a place in the engine or wherever in the avionics, or where that if you don't fix it, then you're holding up a lot of other repairs that need to be performed as well. So that's an important aspect as well. I think is that it? Have we get anything else?
Went through them.
Oh yeah, here's one last one that I didn't mention, but an important one as well. We had several escrow companies at the end of the year. Probably if you're involved in this industry, you got notices, probably starting around the 8th or 10th of December that said, by the way, after December 14th, we won't be taking any more escrows. And if that was your favorite escrow company, unless you could convince, you get on the phone and convince Jeff or whomever to take your escrow, you might be out of luck, or you might have to go to an escrow company that wasn't familiar with you. And that can present a problem as well, because escrow companies these days, because of all the risk of fraud, are much more aggressive when it comes to know your customer due diligence. And if they haven't worked for you in the past, they're going to run all the information that they need to run on you, particularly your specified individuals, who they are, who the UBO, who the ultimate beneficial owner is. They have to know that, and they've got to clear that in order to handle your escrow. Until they do that, they may not even agree to take your escrow. So that can become a really important issue at the end of the year. But that's another issue that will slow a transactional process down if you're dealing with an escrow company that you haven't worked with in the past. Sometimes you have no control. You represent the other party says, this is the company I always use. I insist as a condition of doing this transaction that we use that escrow company. You may not have a choice, but if you don't have a choice, you haven't worked with them in the past, chances are you're going to have to spend some extra time getting them comfortable with you before they will agree to do the deal, do the escrow. And if your ownership is foreign in whole or in part, that may present additional issues. They're very, very careful these days. All of them are. As you may know, I mean, not for that particular reason, but we've had a couple of escrow executives go to federal prison in the last 5 years. And I think nobody else in the escrow business wants to repeat that situation. And with that, what time? It's 10:59. Marcella, have I overtalked it?
Nope, I think you covered everything perfectly, and I have no questions in any of my live streams.
All right, well, thank you so much. Again, I apologize for jumping around, but I hope you found this informative. And Airlex and Aero Marine are always happy to be of service. Thank you so much for joining us today.